The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. So as I mentioned, Roshi is out for the afternoon, and so this is a brief Dharma talk to substitute for Teisho while she's gone. And it seems like there are a lot of things we could talk about today, but it seems what's most forefront in my mind right now is not knowing. I did not prepare anything for this talk today, so this is 100% about expressing not knowing and living as much as possible from this place of flow where there's just this constant beingness, constant becomingness. That's a source of a huge amount of freedom and joy, hopefully clarity. It can be a real challenge to live from that understanding all the time, as we all know. And I feel like it's a huge privilege to be able to try to do that over and over again in sesshin and out of sesshin. And can you hear me okay, Jotai? Okay. Because it really is about the repetition. I feel like a lot of the times the messages we hear in Teisho and anything we read from the ancient masters, it's all kind of pretty similar. Pay really close attention with increasing curiosity and questioning, and then just keep doing that over and over and over again. And slowly it does wear down the jagged edges of a habit pattern and delusion and attachment that keep us from living from that and that keep us from seeing it in the first place too. There's just so much value in repetition and trying over and over again, or bringing ourselves through what feels like maybe, things we don't want to do. I guess things we don't want to do, at least in my experience, that when unless I'm pushing past the point of burnout, when I, sort of go along with what needs to be done in the moment, whether I feel like it or not, that wears away a little bit of attachment to having to have things a certain way, or attachment to delusion, because that's all kind of the same thing. But the more that I do that, the easier it is to let go of habit patterns that are really painful, that do cause suffering. And it's even, as we all know, the ones that seem to be, fun, like thinking about getting a new iPhone or whatever, because they're out now. And wouldn't it be so nice? Not that I thought about it, to get a silver one with a see-through case. Wouldn't that make my life so much better? And but then when I got it, what would that do? Yes, it would probably be easier to read the tiny print on the faxes I have to look at for work all the time on my phone. But that's probably it. That would be the extent of how it would change my life. And it wouldn't fundamentally change my enjoyment of life or experience of it. And in fact, the more I spend, thinking about it or whatever, the less joy I'll have, because it's almost as if seeking pleasure is really just another color of suffering. It's just, it seems on the surface like it would bring happiness and joy, but ultimately it's the same stuff. It's the same suffering, just a different color of it. And so the more I see that, the easier it is to let go of habit patterns that I have about seeking after whatever kind of pleasure it is. especially when life seems pretty nice. It seems like, well, what's the point of walking around the Zendo 500 times? Like, why? Why do we do that? And why do we sit through sesshin when it can be boring and painful? And um, it's because it helps us over and over again. We have that opportunity to um, refocus on the questioning and the attention, and open to a place of awareness that brings true freedom and true joy and true clarity that really helps us and all beings in a real way. But it only comes through repetition, it seems to me. And I guess in terms of encouragement, I could offer that in my own life, this particular practice is really, really healing. Even though it seems like it isn't when you're in a slog, over time it really does. It really does change you, even when it seems like it's not. The last couple of years have been extremely hard for me, as some of you probably know. And each month it just feels like, oh, it's a little bit lighter and a little bit easier. And that clarity that we can open to is just so transformative that ultimately nothing really matters outside of that anyway. So whatever crazy stuff is happening in our personal lives or the world, many of us are paying attention to politics, I'm sure, and it's getting pretty scary about what's going to be happening at the midterms and beyond. And so I often think about the ancient masters who were in similar situations. There was one who was teaching, some monks. I don't know, remember his name or anything, but he was teaching some monks in the monastery, and it was pretty deep training, and he had really committed students, and the emperor wanted him to come be the national teacher. And he felt like that would be a waste of his life energy and didn't want to abandon the students who were doing real training. And so the emperor said, well, then, okay, I'm going to cut your head off. And so he said, that's fine, but just give me a week. So he wrote down everything that he knew about Zen training, and then went and presented to have his head cut off. And I don't remember the exact phrase, but it was something about the knife cutting like a spring breeze. And other times, other masters, there was one who bandits had come to the monastery, and the monks and the teacher were hiding in the what's it called? The mountain gate, whatever. Well, I guess it's called the Sanmon in Japan. Thanks. And so they were hiding up there, and the bandits figured out they were up there, and because it's all wooden, they just set it on fire. And again, I don't remember the exact words, but one of the monks was wondering what to do as the flames were coming higher, and how could they, deal with that situation. And the master basically said there's, even fire, it can be like a cool spring rain or something. Basically, that there was just no problem with being burned alive. There was just no problem with having your head cut off. And that is a real place that can be realized. And am I living from that all the time? No. But that is sure an enticing goal to work towards, in terms of repeating the practice over and over again, to be able to live from a place like that. And I think the inspiration for it, for me, is ever present with what's happening in the world. Being able to just dive into the practice in each moment and let go as much as possible, so that increasingly deep freedom is there to be of service. And then when the time comes to let go and have your head cut off or whatever, hopefully that'll never happen to any of us, but to be able to live from that place of freedom no matter what, is the goal, I think, of our practice. And what we all essentially want, even if on the surface we want an iPhone. Deep down, what we want is that freedom. That's the real longing and the real yearning that I think is part of what it means to be human. And because of all of the societal training that we have to think that we need certain things in a certain place, in a certain way, in a certain career, in a certain amount of money, in a certain car or iPhone, we have to have all those things in order to be happy. And we've all heard that before, but somehow seeing it more directly, how completely silly it is when we have the whole universe, right here under our feet, and right before us, we have all of eternity in the whole universe, and there's nothing outside that. And so we have the biggest riches basically is just within us. And when we seek for the other stuff, the maximum amount of benefit you can get from it, it seems to me, is just a moment of happiness, which ultimately doesn't change the patterns of mind that we have that cause suffering. And so ultimately, it's just another way to suffer. So, on that bright note, I wondered if anybody has anything they'd like to share, or comments, or questions.
I would just like you to repeat that last couple of lines, because I didn't, it sort of got garbled and I didn't hear it very well, and they sounded like they were good.
Oh, I don't remember. Something about, I think, I don't remember. Something about attachment and attachment. I don't know. Does anybody remember what I said? I'm recording it, so we can always just send you the recording. Oh, you're not. Oh, I'm sorry. You can unmute yourself. I'm pretty sure. Maybe not. Hold on. Yeah, I think you can unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. It was about happiness and how that's so momentary, but it doesn't change these deeper kind of patterns.
Yeah.
So that is not so significant, that little bit of happiness in a way.
Yeah, and in fact, it actually makes our suffering worse, because if we're just reinforcing habits of seeking after pleasure, then it makes our suffering worse in the end to seek after pleasure. Even though it seems opposite from our cultural training to always want to go get ice cream or whatever, it doesn't bring any real pleasure or freedom from suffering. It just makes suffering worse. That being said, you have to live a balanced life and do things that are enjoyable too. Like whatever it is for you that brings you joy, that's important. You have to balance things out. But it's just our societal approach to life doesn't bring anybody happiness, and just perpetuates the delusion that has created the world situation that we're in right now. So
Can I ask a question about
yeah.
Repetition?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're caught in these places where we either want something, or we're thinking about something, or worrying about something, and we try to bring ourselves back to the practice, what is the most effective way to do that?
Yeah, so the repetition, so Justin's great question was about how do we bring the mind back to practice when we're finding ourselves in thought loops about things. And that is what the mind does. It's always on a trip somewhere. And it's usually the same 5 things or 10 things that our brain likes to go take a trip to. And so the repetition part is about just bringing bringing yourself back to attention to the practice. So whatever your practice is in that moment. In the Zendo, it's the meditation practice. During Kinhin, it's the walking. It's the physical sensation of walking, of practicing grounding oneself. During activity, you're just 100% devoted to what you're doing in that moment, and that's your practice. And so that's the sort of the repetition, where sometimes it feels like a slog because you're just kind of doing it over and over again. There's an element of, and Roshi talks about this a lot too, and I've certainly experienced it, where you feel like you're just kind of on autopilot during sesshin, where you kind of know what to do, and so you just sort of keep doing it, but you're not really doing it. And so it's about noticing that too, and so bringing like a fresh sense of questioning and curiosity to that practice. So whatever it is that's going on, whether it's a thought loop or just a feeling that you can't do it or a feeling of boredom, there's always, because everything is just a manifestation of how things are, everything's a Dharma gate. And so if you're really bored, or if you're really frustrated or really angry about something, who's angry and where did that come from, and what's the quality of it, and what's the source of it, and what is it really? And if you can kind of approach everything or practice on approaching things with that open curiosity, then everything becomes interesting. Even the boring stuff becomes interesting. That being said, it's kind of hard to do and you get bored and tired of it sometimes, but you just keep trying, and that in and of itself works eventually. Oh, did you say something, Shingen?
Have other people here. So some people are on Zoom and some people are in the room. So the Zoom people on the other computer, I was just asking them if they had any question, they could let me know, and I would make sure that you could hear it.
Yeah, or
That's what I
anything.
was saying.
Yeah, or anything anybody wants to share about how their practice is going, or just anything at all. You're welcome to. I just wanted to express a lot of gratitude for everybody sitting during the session and supporting. We're all supporting each other in a really awesome way. And everybody on Zoom is here in the Zendo right now too. And it's just always so great to sit with everyone. And thank you for listening today. And we can stop and do the 4 vows once I figure out how to stop the recording.